The Specter of Communism in Hawaii, 1947 to 1953, a dissertation submitted to the Graduate Division of the University of Hawaii in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in History, August 1975, by Thomas Michael Holmes, as read by Schitz Leopold. Preface. There is no denying the existence of a Communist Party in Hawaii in the years immediately before and after World War II. However, the character of that party is a much more complicated matter. As the Cold War became a reality in Hawaii and the mainland of the United States, fear grew and stereotypes were created among those who saw communism as a threat to the nation's existence. In some cases, it is clear that Americans served as spies for the Soviet Union. People like Harry Gold, David Greenglass, Morton Sobel, and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were linked to the spy ring headed by British physicist Klaus Fuchs, which delivered secret information about the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. Other cases, such as those involving Alger Hiss, William Remington, Owen Lattimore, and Harry Dexter White, are far more complex. Many individuals suffered in the 1940s and 1950s for their radical views from the 1930s. Political reputations were destroyed by guilt by association, but others, such as Richard Nixon and Joseph McCarthy, rose to prominence during this time. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, the ex-communists came into their own. Whittaker Chambers, Elizabeth Bentley, and Louis Budens became household names, and the FBI even got involved with Herbert Philbrick's "I Was a Communist" for the FBI. The FBI became so deeply involved in the communist apparatus in the U.S. that one unwitting FBI agent even exposed another as a communist agent. While there is humor to be found in these episodes, anti-communism in the late 1940s and early 1950s was a very serious matter. It was an era of fear when people were questioning the results of the recent cataclysm. This fear manifested itself in both the territory of Hawaii and the mainland United States. This work aims to show how that fear first took hold in post-war Hawaii, how it affected the lives of real individuals, how it threatened to split the labor movement, and how it polarized Hawaii's politics. It is inevitable that anyone working for 3 years on a project such as this would develop some opinions and prejudices. In fairness to the reader, these should be stated before plunging into the body of the work. The author rejects the polarized view of the world that characterized so much of the thinking of both communists and anti-communists. Neither the Communist Party in Hawaii nor the business community of Hawaii was ideologically monolithic. On the communist side, there were those for whom Marxism was a genuine faith, one for which they were willing to make great personal sacrifices. There were relatively few in this category. There were others, particularly among the leadership of the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union, ILWU, who saw Marxism as a philosophy and the Communist Party as a vehicle that could be used to create the kind of class consciousness necessary to build a solid union. A union that could stand up to Hawaii's Big Five, the powerful factoring organizations that had long controlled the territory's shipping and agriculture. The Big Five firms were Alexander and Baldwin, American Factors, C. Brewer, Castle and Cook, and Theo H. Davies. They dominated Hawaii's economy for most of the first half of the 20th century through their control of agriculture, banking, insurance, utilities, ground transportation, wholesale and retail merchandising, and inter-island and mainland shipping. Within the Big Five, there was a maze of interlocking boards of directors that allowed a relatively small group of men at the top to manipulate Hawaii's economic life to a remarkable degree. These men tended to take a paternalistic view of their workers and were vigorously anti-union. The Big Five used the principle of divide and rule to prevent the development of strong unions, the divisions generally being made along racial and ethnic lines. Shortly before World War II, organized labor in Hawaii began to make real strides, but progress was suspended with the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Union spirit was not dead, only dormant, and it was fed by the repressive labor practices followed by the military government working hand in hand with the leaders of the economic oligarchy during the war. As the war ended, the ILWU exploded into prominence in Hawaii. From 1944 to 1947, it grew from 900 members to an astounding 30,000 members. And with the successful 79-day sugar strike in the fall of 1946, the ILWU had arrived as a major countervailing force to the Big Five. In the years following World War II, the Big Five saw their economic hegemony eroded in many ways, particularly by organized labor and by aggressive mainland business firms. Today, the Big Five, though still deeply influential, bear little resemblance to the tightly knit ruling oligarchy of the past. The third major group of individuals making up the membership of the Communist Party in Hawaii was composed of rank-and-file union members, from the ILWU mostly, workers who responded affirmatively to the call of a secret organization which they understood existed to combat the alleged conspiracy of the bosses. The workers were not without justification in their mistrust of their employers, but the employers were not, in spite of what the union leaders might say, totally intransigent. Under the leadership of James P. Blaisdell, the Hawaii Employers Council, founded in July 1943, began to reflect a new business attitude toward unions. And in May 1945, a Republican-dominated territorial legislature, representing the interests of the Big Five, passed the Hawaii Employment Relations Act, generally referred to as Hawaii's Little Wagner Act, paving the way for more effective unionism in the territory, particularly in the area of agriculture, which was not covered in the national legislation. The employers found it difficult to understand why the workers of Hawaii did not appreciate their efforts and agreement behind the Little Wagner Act, but the union leaders saw the employers' efforts at the end of World War II as an attempt to co-opt the inevitable union movement in Hawaii and to use company-controlled unions as the vehicle for continued paternalism. The employers saw the inevitability of change but favored gradualism and wanted their own foot on the brake. The ILWU demanded independence for the workers and sought radical changes in wages, working conditions, and the semi-feudal prerequisite system. The ILWU wanted its hand on the throttle. A battle was inevitable, and communism played an important role in that battle, which was waged in both the economic and political arenas. This work is concerned with the specter of communism in the territory of Hawaii from 1947 to 1953. The major focus, however, is upon a single year within that period, the year that anti-communism became one of the dominant themes in the life of the Hawaiian Islands. This year began on November 11, 1947, with an Armistice Day speech given by Governor Ingram M. Steinbach in which he declared war on communism in the territory of Hawaii. The year ended on October 29, 1948, with the dismissal of two teachers, John and Eiko Rieneki, by the Territorial Commissioners of Public Instruction for their failure to possess the ideals of democracy. This euphemism was the commissioners' way of saying that the Rienekis had been found, to their satisfaction, to have been members of the Communist Party in Hawaii. One reason for focusing on the year in which communism first entered the public consciousness is that the entire story of communism in Hawaii, as it was known during the period from 1947 to 1953, was substantially revealed in that year. Subsequent events were largely variations on the basic theme that was first played from November 11, 1947 to October 29, 1948. It may be helpful for the reader to understand how the author chose this topic. The initial interest came from a concern with American foreign policy, its formulation, and the relationship between foreign policy and domestic affairs. Specifically, the author was interested in the Cold War and how it affected and was affected by American domestic politics. The author was first drawn to the Hawaiian scene by the Smith Act trial of 1952-53, and then worked backwards to the year 1947. In Hawaii, the author noted that the government had used three basic approaches to combat communism: judicial, legislative, and executive. With this view of anti-communism in Hawaii and a basic understanding of the most well-known manifestations of anti-communism on the mainland United States, the author began his research for this work. General histories of Hawaii that covered the period in question, such as Gavin Dawes' Shoal of Time and Lawrence H. Fuchs' Hawaii, were reviewed, as were newspapers from the period, such as the Honolulu Advertiser, Honolulu Star Bulletin, and Honolulu Record. Other publications, such as the ILWU Reporter and IMUAS Spotlight, were also examined. Interviews were another valuable source of information. The author became aware of some of the dangers of oral history, such as individuals choosing not to discuss recent, volatile events or only discussing events under conditions of anonymity. The process of remembering is also selective, and much is forgotten or remembered in a way that favors the individual being interviewed. These limitations should be kept in mind when considering the accuracy of oral history. The major research efforts for this work included the detailed examination of the transcript of the hearing of John and Eiko Rieneki by the Territorial Commissioners of Public Instruction, which consisted of over 4,000 pages. Additionally, the author reviewed the transcript of the testimony given before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, which comprised more than 500 pages, and the transcript of the Hawaii Smith Act trial, which consisted of over 16,000 pages. Despite the repetitive nature of much of the transcript material, these transcripts were essential documents in the record of official anti-communism, which, prior to this investigation, remained largely unexplored. The transcript of the Rieneki hearing was particularly valuable as it was the only proceeding in which an individual accused of being a communist chose to respond directly to the charges. It is important to keep in mind that what may seem wrong or silly in the present may have seemed right and serious in the past. The author has made every effort to analyze the events and emotions of this critical time in Hawaii's and the nation's history in their proper context. The author takes full responsibility for any errors of fact or interpretation,